Hi, Charlie. Thanks for joining me. I want to start out and just congratulate you on all the awards that this film has gotten this year, including its three Spirit Awards. How has your year been since the its premiere in Cannes?
It's been very exciting. I mean, it feels like such a long time ago, and the fact that it's only now finally about to go out into theaters is a big moment. But yeah, I'm just excited that people are going to get to see it with an audience soon.
Yeah, I think that's how it should be done. I'll kind of touch on some aspects that I really like about it, but I think for a feature debut, it's quite vulnerable on top of working with young actors, most of who are debuting themselves. So I guess why did you decide to tell this somewhat autobiographical story in this way, or how did that develop?
I guess it's just, I'd sort of been interested in this topic for a long time. I'd made like a short film at one point that was set at a water polo camp for boys. And sort of during COVID, I basically sort of found these old journals I used to keep and was sort of like shot back in a canon to when I was 13 and remembering all this sort of insane stuff that happened and this concept of the plague, which was a thing at a camp I went to. And it just came flooding back, and I felt really like inspired by it, and I felt like I wanted to write a script from it. So it wasn't thinking too much about like the first feature. It was just I was writing a bunch of scripts at the time, and this was one that just felt really personal and exciting, and I was lucky enough to be able to get the money to make it and do it.
Well, I was going to mention that short sauna. Were there concepts from that that you really wanted to develop into a feature? I know that it's not exactly or entirely what becomes of the plague, but were there parts that really intrigued you that you wanted to dive into more?
I mean, I think just this idea of a water polo camp indoor pool kind of setting as a place to explore this kind of 12, 13-year-old boyhood. That felt very interesting to me, and I wanted to take that from the short and bring that into something different. Just that, the way that you're very exposed in a Speedo at that age, walking around a pool, and just the entire sport itself. It's like it's very hard to stay afloat. It's very violent under the surface. It's very discombobulating, and I felt like I don't know, something about it cinematically felt like I didn't actually play water polo at all, but just as I explored it for that short film, it felt like the way that emotionally that I felt when I was that age. And so it just felt like a perfect match to sort of explore these themes of being that age and what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised to see all of these young kids playing water polo. I didn't really think that was a thing, but I did grow up playing a lot of sports. So I immediately connected to a lot of the themes and being othered, feeling this sense of community or having to tiptoe on eggshells around a group like that. Um, were there moments that weren't in the journals or that have stuck with you since your childhood that maybe inspired you to want to look back, or was it just entirely like you kind of blacked it out because that experience was so tough?
Yeah, I think that, I think everyone that I know at least kind of blocks out that time almost immediately. Like by the time you're in ninth grade, I think seventh and eighth grade have been put in a box, shoved under a bed. And by the time you're in college and then into your 20s, it's really, been pushed down. And I think
Hmm.
it's such an emotional, intense time for anyone that it's like you're kind of becoming aware of your consciousness in a way, or and your mortality in this new way. And I think that's so overwhelming that the only way to deal with that much emotion is to kind of like destroy it and hide it somewhere. And so I think it was more that, it's not that it was like the journals was the whole plot. It was just that, reading even my own handwriting from that time just like opened the gates for me to have these memories of all kinds of things and just what it felt like and all the people I knew and the things that we talk about. And I don't know. I guess it was more just about trying to capture that sense of wanting to belong so badly and the lengths that that you go to try to fit in and the ways that that can kind of shape your life. And the events over a few weeks, maybe in one summer with some people you don't really know and you don't really stay in touch with can really shape you as a person. And so that felt interesting to me. And I think that sort of was the jumping off point. It kind of like became something more fictional, but I think it's something anyone can relate to, I think.
Yeah, very rooted in reality and your past memories, some very dark corners of your mind, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, Working with the kids, again, most of them are new actors. What was that experience like? Because I also liked that, it's this flipped, more volatile dynamic of the kids leading the show and Joel Edgerton as the coach. He's kind of in the background and he's a mentor to Ben at times, but somewhat fleetingly. And, there's a scene where he's trying to punish them and it's very difficult for him to take charge. So, what was that a fun challenge for you as a director?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I just remember having coaches like that weren't these like drill sergeant uh alpha male type guys. They were just I don't know exactly how they ended up teaching at these camps, but it was like, I think that they had good intentions, but it was like no one knows how to handle a group of 12 or 13-year-old boys. And talking to my friends or people I've met who have seen the film who are even like teachers or counselors and stuff, they're like, yeah, it's really accurate that like when you're working with this age group, you feel like every angle you take is a losing angle, and they're able to kind of twist your words around and make everything you say, it brings you back to that time in a way where you're just like, God, there's no correct way to handle anything. And so I think that, Joel, I think he's spent some time with kids and worked with boys that age and on his own films, and he understands from his own experiences how hard it is to be a guide. And so it was pretty easy in a way.
In the casting process, and particularly Everett, that's maybe someone who you see as a younger version of yourself, or were there aspects during his audition or whatever that process was like that you saw maybe parts of your younger self in him, or maybe just any of the other actors, Kaio, any of the other boys?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I see myself in all these characters in a way. I think that I just had a particular idea of Ben that I think became its own character. And as someone who's just, really overthinking and very uncomfortable with himself. And I think that Everett, I mean, I'd seen him in Griffin in the Summer actually before we auditioned him, and I thought he was incredible in that. And that he would be completely wrong for the role because he's so confident and brash and funny and loud and this theater kid. And then he comes into the audition and he's like created this whole character that is like looking around and like adjusting his shirt and very uncomfortable in his own skin. And it was just clear to me that he's like an insanely good actor. Forget being 14 or he's just like as good as any great actor. And he was able to create a full physical transformative role. And so, I mean, it became pretty clear from there that, not only did I see him in the role, but I saw how he could create a journey for the character and an arc and kind of shift his emotion scene to scene and be very versatile. And it was very thrilling to get to go through the audition process with him.
hmm I do like that you see a confidence in him and that he tries to be a part of the group. He sits at the table during lunch, even though he, like me, like absolutely wouldn't want to. And then by the end, my favorite scene in the movie is when he's at the diner with the coach, and it sort of feels like it's you writing, a version of your current self to your younger self and having that conversation that maybe you'd want to have. How did you end up writing the scene and then directing it?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, I thought of it a little bit that way, I guess. And I tried to put myself in the coach, Daddy Wags, the coach position. And put like a tape recorder on and I tried to say something that might be helpful and realized how kind of like fumbling and inarticulate I was. And despite my best efforts to come up with something deep to say, just the more I tried, the more kind of trite and cliche the words were. And so I thought there was something in that. And then telling Joel to try to overcome the language and find a way to connect. And I do think that I think the pep talk he gives, which Ben calls out, is not on a surface level very deep, but I do think that there is a connection between them just in the attempt to connect at all from sort of an older male figure. There's something, meaningful in that, I think. And the people who tried to do that for me, I think it meant a lot that they were trying, even if the words they said were pretty like, be yourself and just keep going, like all this shit that sort of is like, that doesn't actually help. But
Yeah.
yeah, so to me, there was something really, I don't know, touching about watching them because there is this spark between them, even though it's sort of beneath the actual dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. I think with some of the aspects of the movie, you touched on this earlier of like, the violence under the water. It seems serene at first. I love that first shot where they jump into this empty pool and you can just feel and see all of the violence, the movement, how active water polo is. So I think maybe if you can talk about working with Stephen Brecken and how you shot. I know you worked with film here, and I think the underwater shots are absolutely gorgeous. So how did that process work and working both above and under the water during their playtime also?
Yeah, I mean, I had worked with Steven. I had done, I guess, three shorts with him already. Um, and so we already have established kind of like a vocabulary together. And we were just talking about the script. And I think the way we always start is we're just talking about our personal experiences and hanging out and about what it was like for us to be boys. And we're learning about water polo and we're going to games together. And kind of noticing that water polo wasn't the most visually exciting thing to watch from the surface. It's a lot of like splashing around, it's sort of hard to track. And we came across some really interesting underwater photography, and it kind of made us think that really the underwater stuff should be, not the typical like really shallow focus, like one beam of light, but instead to almost feel like these deep focus war tableaus where you see all these bodies, mingling like a painting and to try to blast light in there and shoot at sort of like a slower stop and see the action. And so it was a lot about training the boys to play water polo, mixing them with body doubles who are more experienced polo players, and so we could actually photograph the sport and coordinate that. I mean, we choreographed certain sections so that what was happening above and below would match, and we could plan where we'd cut from one to the other. And um, but we had this amazing underwater team that came from Germany, this like scuba team, and we would speak to them on radio and they were underwater, they could hear us and they couldn't talk back but we would say just like keep the camera rolling all the time when we could underwater. And you never know when something happens that's magical. And so we had a ton of footage underwater that we kind of sorted through to sculpt some of those sort of like interludes.
So cool. Some of that too plays obviously with the intensity and that the score, the sound. I love the score by Johann Lennox and how it's really composed of voices, and throughout the film it just becomes more ominous. That theme changes throughout, and um, I think part of it is, what are your inspirations? Because again, with the camera it makes me him fidgeting with his nails and picking his nails immediately made me think of Black Swan and the fingernail sequence there and just how disgusting that feels and sounds. So I guess what were some of your inspirations as a filmmaker or working in the psychological thriller and horror space?
I mean, the like picking at his cuticles is just a bad habit that I've had my whole life, and so that came more from that experience than than movies, but obviously, you see that used to really great effect in stuff like Black Swan and all kinds of kind of like body horrors. And there's something about a really small thing, like a tiny, a really close-up shot and a little like cuticle that you're picking that is in a way more disturbing to watch than like getting someone's head chopped off, I think. And so I don't know. To me, it just felt like a very accurate way to show, when he's anxious or he's trying to, you know, distract himself from his emotion or is overwhelmed, that he's trying to take control and that he'd be doing that through something like, picking at his finger. And I knew it would be a little bit, like stressful to watch, but I guess it was interesting to see in the first test screenings how much that got like a full, like, like very vocal reaction from an audience and has continued to. And I guess it's one of the more visceral shots it's turned out is that kind of diner shot of his thumb.
Hmm. I mean, that's the experience that you really want to feel or that you look back to as a teenager. I think that helps spark some of those memories. Um, Along with that, I mean, the plague itself kind of becomes this mental and physical embodiment of that. So I like how that transitions, and I think the visual effects and all of the, I don't know, were there a lot of prosthetics that you worked with maybe Eli and Ben in particular, with making turning that real?
Yeah, definitely some prosthetic stuff and some just makeup and combination of things. But we tried to do everything pretty practically.
Very
And
cool.
yeah.
Um, I guess one final question that's not about the plague, if I can. Can you share any new details about your next project, The Mask of the Red Death? Um, I mean, it sounds like a bigger sophomore feature, and I think it's an exciting move. I know there aren't many details out yet, but some of your crew that you've worked with is also returning.
Yes, totally. I mean, a lot of the same people are coming back and yeah, I mean, it's much more sort of this like more historical time period. It's way more of like a dark comedy. It's a lot more, it's like a more maximalist kind of type of movie. They're also sort of a plague in that, but it's like a mythological one. I guess there's similarity there, but I'd say it's a fairly different genre, but I do think it's kind of also exploring kind of like social dynamics in a claustrophobic setting in a very different way. And yeah, Steven is shooting it as well. Johan's doing the score, a lot of the same team coming back. So very excited for that
Awesome.
one.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Congratulations again. I appreciate your time. And yeah, I'm excited. I hope a lot of people go and see The Plague in theaters.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good one.